Hi TYB, well welcome to the book of Esther. Now I know sometimes when you hear the book of Esther you think chick flick, but here at TYB we're not going to focus on the chick flick nature of this book, this beautiful romantic story of this princess going before the king, and that's a beautiful way to read it. We're going to focus a little bit more on this historical book. Where is this situated in the story of the Bible? Why is this in the Bible? Why is this story of this princess that goes before a king? Why do I care about this book? This incredible text is so unique. The literary genius of whoever wrote this is more than just a princess story, and I want to really bring that alive in this snapshot. Now we're only just going to do one snapshot dive and deep dive and really jump into these, because we're really going to go through the reigning in exile and the understanding of that God's not mentioned in this book. There is so much to this book and I don't want to give you previews, but let's jump in. So the author, date and background of this text, and this is what we do in the snapshot videos. Unfortunately, the author we don't know, but he tells us where it is set. It's this beautiful historical story, and he sets it in Persia. It says this is what happened during the time of Xerxes. The Xerxes who ruled over 127 provinces stretching from India to Kush. At that time, King Xerxes reigned from his royal throne in the citadel of Susa. Now, what I do when I read a story, especially a biblical narrative, is I have a look and go, okay, where is this today? Let's have a look at a map. You can have a look at a map online. And when you grab this, I just Google searched the citadel of Susa, Esther, and it brought up this incredible map, and all different maps, so pick one that you like, and we're actually in Iraq. We're actually in Susa here is in Persia in this time. Now it's this incredible understanding when you think about that. As TYB guys, you've got to start to think and go, okay, I'm not in Jerusalem. I'm not in the holy city. I'm not in God's holy city at this time where I would expect the favor of God to be. I'm in Persia. So when you read this story, King Xerxes is a Persian king, like King Cyprus. These Persian kings that had actually come and taken the people way back in the exile period, they'd come Babylonians and they'd come and taken the people, and we now are in King Persia, the Persian Empire. So we're thinking Esther and Mordecai, when they start to stand up for the Jewish nation, this is life or death. This isn't just, oh, could you? This is life and death situation, strength and faith of life and death. Okay, so where is it situated in the Bible? It's situated after Nehemiah, and it's actually this historical account right at the end of the text in the writings. But when you actually look at when this should be situated, you go back to Ezra. And the beginning of Ezra, we know the book of Ezra is about the building of the temple, the rebuilding of the temple in Jerusalem. And it says in the first year, this is Ezra 1:1, in the first year of Cyrus, king of Persia. Okay, so Cyrus, king of Persia, was king of Persia before King Xerxes, about 60 years before King Xerxes. So we are 60 years on from the beginning of the book of Ezra, and we're probably just in between the book of Ezra and Nehemiah. But what is very interesting about the book of Esther is this. Esther and Mordecai did not go back to Jerusalem when the remnant went back in Ezra. They stayed in exile. They stayed in Persia. And because they stayed in Persia, it's this understanding that even though the people didn't go back to Jerusalem in the exile, in the return, God was still with them and he used them for his glory. This is just like Daniel. When Daniel is in exile, reigning in exile, Esther and Mordecai are on the same level of Daniel. Esther isn't this fluffy princess. Esther and Mordecai are on the same level of standing up like Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in an enemy's camp. Esther and Mordecai have that same strength, and I absolutely love that. We've got this sense of also a story like Joseph, the rags to riches and reigning in Pharaoh's land, and Mordecai being taken, Esther being taken from rags to riches to impact God's people. So you've got this sense of history. Can you feel it? It's a little bit grittier than a princess story. Can you feel it yet? So we're in the Persian Empire. Xerxes is this flamboyant king, and as you read chapter 1, flamboyant in this story, but a killer, a warrior. He is in history. Herodotus, of Greek historian, Herodias, describes Xerxes as a tall, handsome, ambitious ruler. This is actually a king of our time. Have a study of Xerxes and it's quite incredible. He's a wealthy king. He's giving banquets, 127 provinces he's ruling. This is not some small king that Esther stands before. This is king of 127 provinces. So when she goes before this king, I mean, even in the story, he says, Haman comes in and goes, I don't really like the Jewish people. Oh, okay, I'll just write an edict to kill them all. The power of this king for evil is quite strong, and you can feel this sense of whoever wrote this book. We don't know who wrote this book, but whoever wrote this book, this sense of good versus evil, standing in the midst of evil and for good and saving the people. There's this beautiful sense of a warrior spirit in this book, and I love it. Now, we know it's set in the time of Xerxes, the setting, but when was it written? They say it was written maybe in the next period. So Artaxerxes came in after Xerxes. Xerxes was reigning about 486 to 465 BC. Artaxerxes reigned from 464 BC to 423 BC, and they think it's written about that time. It could be later, it could be, the 4th and 5th century, but they don't know. The reason they think it's after Xerxes is because it's a backstory. When you read it, you feel like the narrator, who is part of the character telling everything that's happening, is kind of telling a backstory. This is what happened. And the reason he's telling this story is the festival of Purim. At the end, he talks about Purim established. And it's kind of like, oh, this is why we do this festival. The festival of Purim is a Jewish festival celebrated because this happened and this edict happened, and Esther and Mordecai fought in the enemy's camp, and an edict happened to save God's people. So at this festival, they read Esther to celebrate it. Just like with the Moses account of the Red Sea, they read it to celebrate what God had done. They read this book to celebrate it. So it's written as a Jewish account of a festival to remind you of God's goodness. Can you feel the strength of this? I absolutely have loved this. I love every book in the Bible, but this has been so much fun getting more than a princess story out of this text. Now, the dates throughout make it really historical. I want you to highlight the dates as you go through. I wish I knew these dates as well as I know January, February, March, April. It talks about the month that this happened, and I feel like the author wants us to have this pace of how these accounts took place and how long these accounts were, but because I don't know the months and the dates, it's kind of frustrating. I'm like, oh man, if I knew that was January to December, I would know how long that was. But maybe study that, TYB. Maybe go through and study why he puts these dates in there. For me, the dates really set it as historical. This actually happened. And there's this frustrating, let me take you to 10:2, this frustrating moment where he says this, 10:1, King Xerxes imposed tribute throughout the empire. This is the end of the beautiful story, to its distant shores, and all his acts of power and might, together with a full account of the greatness of Mordecai, whom the king had promoted. Can you feel that Joshua feeling of, Joseph being promoted in Pharaoh? It's like Mordecai being promoted. Whom the king had promoted. Are they not written in the book of the annals of the kings of Media and Persia? My heart was like, I don't know. Are they written? I want to see them. I'm sure they are. This is a historical account. Now, what I want to focus in on the dive this week, I know Pastor James Weeks is going to focus in on reigning in exile, and that this is more than just an account of a princess. But what I want to focus in on the dive this week is God is not mentioned in this text. When you read it. And he's not mentioned. He is absolutely in the book, in the coincidences in the book. And I want you to highlight the coincidences that you can see that are clearly God's handprint over this whole thing. God is in control of this whole situation. Haman and King Xerxes make an edict to absolutely annihilate the Jewish people. And you can see God's hand in it as he goes in, sends Esther in to save his people. But from the beginning, before the edict was made, God had it set up that Esther had to be in that king's palace. And I love that. Before Esther knew why she was in the palace, God had sent her to be in a place. But it's not like this prophet says, Esther, go to the palace. It's not like the Red Sea parts and she walks through and she knows the will of God so openly because there's miracles, signs and wonders all around her. Would you go into the king's palace, the enemy's palace, without the miracles, signs and wonders, but just the obedience of her mentor Mordecai, her uncle Mordecai saying, go. There's a reason you're supposed to be in there. It's not until I love the moment where Mordecai says, Who knows? Maybe you're in there for such a time as this. Maybe God has you, TYB, doing something and you have no idea why you're doing it. What am I doing here? And it's going to be revealed as an Esther moment. Maybe you're in there for such a time as this. Right now you don't know what that time is, but I can guarantee there will be an Esther moment where you go, I am here for this moment, and you're going to step into all God has planned for you. How exciting is that? Okay, so God is not actually in this book, but it is a book that shows you that God is across all the nations. He is across even Jerusalem when we know what's happening in Ezra and Nehemiah. He's across what's happening in Persia with Esther and Mordecai. He's across the nations. Guys, you are going to absolutely love this text. It's a mix of genre, it's history, it's literary genius. There's characters that you're going to fall in love with. There's characters with Haman that you're going to absolutely hate. Jump into this book for all it's worth and really adventure through this incredible book of ruling and reigning in the enemy's camp. No matter where God has them, Esther and Mordecai stand up for God. So have a great time in the book of Esther.